came out with a poll today, I think. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's your spring poll, actually. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, we released it this afternoon. Actually, I got my notice from you already that the poll was up. So, yeah, we're getting a lot of interest. I've had some of the comments back were one of the better polls we've ever done. We looked at the legislature, and we looked at a different scenario instead of just saying you want to pay more income tax versus making reductions to health care and higher education, which normally the public says no, don't ask me for that money. We use the scenario that is available to the legislature, and the one that recently just passed the House, where they're getting revenue from lots of different sources, and we actually gave some of those sources to the people we were talking to and told them the various scenarios, raising fees and cutting out some of the special tax exemptions, and that versus services. Mention the services would be cut. We know LSU would be dramatically hurt. We know the hospitals would be hurt. We had secretaries of departments like Secretary of what would you say? The Secretary of State said he would furlough employees. So it's no big secret that these budget cuts would be play a dramatic part in huge reductions in services to residents in Louisiana. And we even asked the doomsday scenario, what if Jindal and the legislature couldn't actually come together and they had to make these dramatic cuts where LSU would lose summer school and all of the dire consequences that would obviously happen if we didn't come up with $1.6 billion.
Sure. Now, if I can interrupt, I'm looking at this. A strong majority, 76.3, think the legislature would have acted irresponsibly if the session ended without additional revenue and the doomsday scenario consequences occurred. That's extraordinary. Isn't it?
Well, Steve, I hope you like the approach, because instead of doing the old poll questions we normally do, but you want to pay, you want to pay more taxes and you want to cut government, that's really not the scenario that's present. I mean, there is a different alternative, but the public is beginning to pay attention, especially when you're hearing the president of LSU talk about the dramatic action he would take just to save LSU's credit. And so we pose those questions, the different scenarios of raising revenues from lots of people, everybody paying their fair share, nobody being scalped, and that versus, making $1.6 billion in cuts. And, and the question you're talking about was, what if all this really happened? And most people in Louisiana, rightly so, said the legislature would be acting irresponsibly. No matter who the governor is, they would be the same thing. So it really takes a look at what the legislation is facing, the legislation that's available, the picture of today of Louisiana, the different choices, and we asked voters, and we got a pretty interesting response. It wasn't just, okay, it's you giving us property taxes, or we will shut LSU down. That's not what they're trying to do. So then, based on the survey, what the legislature is attempting to do is pretty popular with the public. They're trying to raise revenue from lots of sources. I'm sure the people they're getting the revenue from aren't as happy about it, but I think overall, as long as the public perceives that it is fair and everybody pays something and nobody is scalped, then I think that's why this question got such a good positive response from Louisiana voters.
Yeah, I actually wrote a column today saying that despite what happened last Thursday in terms of roughly $600 million raised in terms of revenues, whether you call it tax or not, the governor is saying that that we're still going to have a balanced budget and we're still going to preserve higher ed and also health care. Well, the numbers don't work. You can't do that. You can't have a balanced budget and save those. And I think that this poll, in a sense, indicates, well, hey, you know, we need to have some real finality to all this. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think we can describe what's happening at the Capitol. That these are the choices the legislature have to make. I mean, you can't cut $1.6 billion. You can't cut $1 billion out of the budget and not dramatically affect the operations of our universities, the quality of health care in our hospitals, all the numerous services. It's not just the hospitals. You got all these healthcare clinics that treat so many people. So all of those would be dramatically affected, and that's the way we described it. And I don't think the public buys that you can cut $1 billion out of this budget without some dramatic reductions in state services. And as the poll indicated, there are a lot of people out there, and the people that responded the most dramatically in this survey were women. They're the ones responsible for the, they're the ones that pay attention to what's available in the health care, the education opportunities for the kids at universities, how much that costs. They're the ones who generally pay the bills, and they're the ones that take care of the kids. So, hearing the various scenarios that we presented with them, they were the ones that were much more inclined to be very upset with the legislature, the governor, and anybody else if this money doesn't come into fruition to avoid these huge budget cuts. And what Jindal's talking about, he wasn't very specific, but the public made it clear that they're not interested in the state suffering more catastrophic, I guess you'd say catastrophic reductions in the budgets that affect state services. If you go further into this poll and you look at Jindal, Jindal is really, his popularity is taking a beating, and one of the major reasons is because no other governor in my lifetime has suffered such a hit on his popularity because he hasn't had any revenue. And he can describe this any way he wants to try to talk his way out of it. But because of a lack of revenue, that is one of the big reasons why his popularity is continued to fall. If he had a $500 million a year plus was paying all our bills, I'm sure it'd be a quite different picture of he and his popularity. But at this point in time, the public's basically about had enough.
Right. So in terms of the actual numbers in Jindal, what you're saying is that he received a 31.8% positive job performance. But in December, it was 40.9. So we're talking about roughly a 9-point difference.
Yeah, and it's pretty historic because Kathleen, he's right about where Kathleen was when she took a huge hit in her popularity because of the voters' perception that she wasn't doing a very good job related to the, her efforts after Katrina. And of course, the only other person to get down to that number was Edwin Edwards, when he was having his, I guess you'd say low point of being governor in any one of those 4 years. When you get around 31%, you're about as, we don't have anything lower than that by any governor in modern times since polling's come. So
sure.
Jindal's right around, adds his name to two other governors who, for various reasons, had real problems in
sure. One a major hurricane, two major hurricanes, and the other one being indicted. I mean, that's great company, huh?
Well,
I mean, really, but getting to the issue that we were talking about before, if I might, and that is that according to your poll, again, the public does not want to beat itself up anymore. It wants to it knows it has to raise revenue. Now, having said that, Jindal's saying that he's not going to raise any taxes. But he also says, again, that, he's going to balance the budget, not raise any tax, and save higher ed and also health care. And therefore, you have a dichotomy. You have Jindal, who wants to be president, saying no taxes, and you have the rest of the state, at least two-thirds of the state roughly, or more, about 70% of the state, basically saying, look, we've got to raise revenues. We can't let our universities and our health care just go to complete pot.
Well, I don't know what to say about Jindal. I mean, that's he's governor. He's been around now, entering into his 8th year, about the midway of it, and I can talk about Jindal all I want, but Bobby Jindal's, is in charge of his destiny. He's in charge of his popularity, and you can look at this poll, and it's very easy to tell, why he's suffering. Why, in the latest poll, one of the interesting things was that for the first time he's really dropped down with even Republican voters. The budget crisis and all the discussion about cuts is for the first time dramatically affecting him with his Republican base.
Sure. And if you're a legislator, if you're a Republican legislator and you've always have voted against taxes, and you look at a poll like this, and you're looking at, okay, what are my options? I've got to hold my nose, raise taxes. I've got to not raise tax. We may have a veto override session. I mean,
well, that's a very distinct possibility, and I think that one of the things you can easily look at and decide if you're a legislator, you can look at what the options are, and the public's pretty much agreeing with the approach they're taking so far. And look, there's one stark difference between Jindal and the legislature. He's finished in Louisiana. He's going on to something else, but they're stuck here, and most of them are having to run for re-election. In this budget disaster that's pending right before their eyes is a major problem for citizens of Louisiana, the taxpayers, and they've kind of gotten used to it. But 1.6 billion, Steve, is
right.
Something totally different, and I don't think anybody can imagine 1.6 billion cut out of this budget if it would be that much, and not expect the state to dramatically suffer. So legislators are aware of this. They know that this is an
extraordinary circumstance.
This is something they've never experienced, and they haven't been paying a lot of attention to it because it's been talked about, and we've had this happen in the last 5 or 6 years, but nothing of this magnitude. And the other thing is the legislature is now in session, Steve, so something has to be done about it. Mm-hmm. And I think you're going to see them pay a little more attention because now it's crunch time. They've heard about it, and will the legislature get out of this mess? So, for the last 6 months or so, we've been talking about the inevitability of facing this consequence, and now we're here. And I think the public's paying a little more attention because, it's real and it's something that could happen. So, and that's why the legislators here. And the other thing I'll state very bluntly is, according to this poll, they want them to act responsibly and do, and avoid this. They're not willing to tolerate a massive cut again to the budget.